Hello, friend. The mystical American Patriots Society is transmitting to you from beneath 4 million cubic feet of solid granite, in the burning heart of the Yellowstone caldera. This is a variety program for normal sandwich-eating Americans with some concerns about living in a deranged, post-Christian technocracy. So, keep your third eye on the sky and your ear to the ground, as Sumo and Smokestack connect your main brain vein to a higher plane. Are you ready? Stand by.
Sumo, my dude.
Beyond the rim of starlight, my love is wandering in starflight. I know he'll find in star cluster reaches love, strange love a star woman teaches. That's the original words of the original Star Trek theme.
It had words?
Yes, but no. It was something like there was some copyright law thing where you couldn't get royalties on a song without words or something, like a melody.
Oh.
So Gene Roddenberry wrote words to it and just never played them.
That's funny.
So he could get some money. He was, but Leonard Nimoy did record it at one point, which was nice. Leonard Nimoy was an awful singer, but that did not stop him. Just like Patrick, every Star Trek leading man has been unable to resist the siren call of making a bad, ill-advised album.
Really? They've all made musical albums?
Well, so William Shatner made several.
Yeah. He kind of did like a lounge singer bit, right?
Yeah, his are okay. He just does sort of a soft-spoken, stuff. He did one with Brad Paisley, oddly enough.
Oh, weird.
And then what's the guy the bald one? Captain Picard, Patrick Stewart.
Mm-hmm.
He did one like 3 years ago when he was like 82 or whatever. He's old now. Where and he's a British guy.
Mm-hmm.
And he did Patrick Stewart does cowboy classics. Or he did old Western, like, Riders on the Sky, and he's dressed in full cowboy.
That doesn't work at all. Maybe they just know, like, I did Star Trek. At any point in my life, I can produce any sort of musical album, and the Star Trek fiends will buy it, a lot of it, and I will make money. There's probably a number that they all know. It's like, if I do a record, I'll make this much money in my bank. Yeah. Heck, why not?
But why cowboy classics? If you're Patrick Stewart, that's the question.
Maybe you lost a bet.
I don't know. But Leonard Nimoy did a bunch. He did one with where he was singing about hobbits.
Cool. Now that actually sounds all right.
And then he and William Shatner did one called Spaced Out as an album, which had no theme or overarching anything connecting any of the songs. They were all just random and randomly strung together. Leonard Nimoy, though, I liked him. He had this great show in the 70s called In Search Of. It was sort of like it was a paranormal show.
Right.
And it was well done. And that was back when TV shows had like a bazillion episodes per season. These days, a season is like 8 episodes.
Right.
Back then, a season was like 113 episodes.
No, we've been watching Dick Van Dyke Show. There's tons of episodes in that thing, man.
I really don't know how they did it. They
must have worked 24/7. It was incredible the amount of content they put out.
Yeah, it was like the original Star Trek ran for I think only 2 seasons, but they have over 100 episodes.
Wow.
It's insane. I don't know what they were doing, but Leonard Nimoy had the biggest collars back then.
Collars? Like on his shirts?
Yeah, like on his shirts, because it was the 70s. Like, his collars were as big as his face. And that's a look that should come back. But anyway, I took the 3D printer pill recently. Have you ever 3D printed anything?
No, I've done some stuff with 3D milling machines. That was kind of neat, sort of secondhand, and that was cool. But I always had a. How have they been doing with the strength of the material? Because that was always my beef with it.
Well, I don't know because I'll say this: 3D printing is not something at the point that is a user-friendly experience.
I would imagine.
So I got it. I finally got something to work after like 2 weeks, and I printed a little tiny dog statue, and it worked.
Awesome.
But beforehand, it would start printing stuff, and then it would just explode into a pile of ribbons, and it doesn't know when it's messed up, right? So it just continues like an evil automaton, just spewing out stuff into the air in these long strings. So like you're like, oh, okay, it's working, and you go away for like 30 minutes. You come back, and your house is just covered in this stuff. Mm-hmm. So it was a bit like having if you've ever had a problem with a C++ program.
No, thankfully.
Where you have like bugs in it and stuff, and you're trying to debug it. It was a bit like having that, but in a piece of hardware.
Yeah.
Like a physical broken software program. Mm-hmm. And that made me think this is how it's going to be when we have robots.
Yeah.
People think it's just going to be like, no, they're just going to be broken all the time.
Yep.
And doing what you don't want to do, and mindlessly washing dishes when there aren't any dishes there.
Taking out empty trash bags.
Uh-huh.
Putting your kids in the washing machine.
It was pretty cool when I finally got it to work, but it was like the first, like I would do it, and they were like, "Well, look, is the bed optically flat? Like, how level is your bed? Is the bed of the thing?" And so I get on there and I try to, and you stick a little piece of paper, one piece of printer paper between the printer head and the bed, and it has to slide there and scrape a little bit, but not too much. And it has to touch it.
Goodness.
Let's do it on all four corners. And when you change one corner, the other corner gets a little off. And then I start printing it, and they're like, well, it still falls apart. Like, well, maybe it's not melting enough. So I crank up the heat of the bed to like 250 degrees. Then it melts fine, but then it starts falling apart toward the top. So then I crank up the heat. And so now I just have this blazing hot thing printing in the side of the room. Like everything's like 400 degrees. Just steam. And then it stops, and it's like, oh, look, there's a little tiny statue. But it lets you have so many options.
Yeah.
That it's really hard to know what to do. It's like you can change the speed of the head, you can change the axis. It's the only machine I've ever seen that allows you to control the jerk.
The jerk?
Yeah, that's the second derivative of the velocity. So the first derivative is acceleration, and the jerk is the acceleration of the acceleration. And it's like, well, is your jerk speed properly set?
Wow.
Your printing is like, I have no, I don't know. I don't know how fast my acceleration of acceleration should be.
Did you just like buy a weird black market 3D printer from Russia or what?
No, this is a normal 3D printer. Now it's not top of the line; it's middle grade.
Okay.
I think if I got the super expensive one, maybe some of the stuff would have been more automated. Mm-hmm. But I wanted to try it out first on like a less expensive one.
Yeah.
I did get this filamentous wood. I can print wood. That's pretty nice.
Filamentous wood.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was 3 words. Filament is wood.
Oh.
I did get this filament is wood. But it wasn't good English on my part.
Okay.
So you can print wood. It's like they took sawdust. They took like 70 parts sawdust and 30 parts plastic. Mm-hmm. And they mixed it together into like this plastic you can melt and then print as a paste. And it comes out looking like a piece of wood. It's sort of nice.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah, I want to get one of the ones that prints metal, but you need a fume hood and a whole thing.
It sounds like it would burn spectacularly.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I'm worried about. Like when I crank up this heat, is it going to into fire?
Right.
So I don't know. I've been thinking a lot about how monkeys got to America.
How did they get to America?
I don't know, and I've never heard a solid answer. Can you think? I mean, think about it. So
the long pause in my brain is trying to identify monkey species that are native to the Americas. Well, there's some in South America, I guess.
right, South America and Central America have monkeys. Here's the problem, though. All New World monkeys have prehensile tails, and no Old World monkeys do.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, isn't it, though? So if you're going to say, well, the New World monkeys come from the Old World monkeys, they would have had to come over here a long, long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
Like evolve a prehensile tail.
What if the Old World monkeys were the rejects from the New World monkeys and they sent them across the ocean in ships? It's like, if you don't have a prehensile tail, you have to go.
Exactly. Well,
it was a ethnic cleansing.
So every time I've ever met a biologist, like if I'm at a party or a university and someone's like, "Oh, I'm a biologist," even if they're not of a monkey biologist, like there's one guy I badgered for like an hour and he was a turtle guy.
Mm-hmm.
But I was like, "How did monkeys get to the Americas?" And I've never heard a good answer. I've looked it up. I've researched it. The best answer anyone has ever said was spontaneous land raft. Which isn't real.
Is there
right?
Is there some, I mean, well, how did monkeys get to wherever else? Asia.
Well, the idea was that, well, you could walk to Asia
from
as a monkey from Africa.
Okay. Well, how did they get to Africa?
Well, you just got to assume that life starts somewhere.
Why didn't it start everywhere at the same time?
Because that would be highly improbable, one would think.
I don't know.
I mean, I'm just saying, it seems like if they're going to get so here's the problem. If the monkeys got to the Americas so long ago that they were able to develop a prehensile tail,
mm-hmm.
that puts them there before, well before the established timeline of people leaving Africa. But to me, the only feasible way monkeys can get to the Americas is if people brought them. Because there is no, if they can't walk there. Because even if you assume a Bering Land Bridge, right, there are no monkeys between. One, that doesn't work with the timeline for the prehensile tail thing. But two, there are no monkeys all the way across North America. They just skipped all that part and just decided we only live in Cuba or, Colombia.
Mm-hmm.
They just skipped all of California.
Yeah.
In Canada and said, we're just going to keep walking. We got over here to the Bering Land Bridge. We don't find this land suitable, and we're going to keep walking south. Doesn't make any sense. So to me, the only way the monkeys could have gotten to South America is if people brought them on boats a long, long time ago. But that would put people in the Americas before the established leaving of Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Which is why I propose, and not me alone, that actually humanity started in Australia.
When is the proposed leaving of Africa? How many years ago?
Oh, I don't know, a long time ago. But it's not long enough.
I mean, are we talking millions of years? Because when people start throwing around millions of years ago numbers, my eyes glaze over because.
Right.
No,
I'm pretty sure
science.
People talk about the leaving of Africa in the terms of hundreds of thousands of years.
Okay.
So
it's dubious, but okay.
Yeah, dubious, but here's the other thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the possum.
Mm-hmm.
What about the possum? No one ever thinks about the possum.
I don't.
The possum is like the only marsupial outside of Australia. How did the possum get out of Australia? Right?
I just don't have a problem with this.
Here's the thing about I know, but here's the thing about marsupials. You know the thing about marsupials is they have more than one womb.
Right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Because and then if they get pregnant at two separate times, they can eject one that's not quite ready to come out into the world yet into a pouch.
Right.
So they make more room in the stomach for the other growing baby.
Is that how that works?
Yeah. That's what that's about.
Okay.
Now, kangaroos just have 2 wombs. Some things, like the echinda, have 4. Right?
The echidna?
And no, and I think possums have 2. But anyway, so all the marsupials live in Australia except the possum. Right?
Mm-hmm.
What is that about? So somehow the possum, if we assume the possum comes from marsupial land,
Right.
somehow the possum has to get to the Americas also. How do you do that? You do that so I'm proposing that ancient Australians got on boats and got to the Americas.
So they could have taken the ugliest marsupial in Australia and then inbred it to make it uglier on the ride over.
Right.
And then tortured it in a way that would leave a long-term, multi-generational psychological scar on the animal, and then let it loose in the Americas, and that became the possum.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
No, but yeah, no one. I bring up this to biologists. I'm like, what about possums?
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, I study turtle migrations. I don't know why is this guy assaulting me. Say, but you haven't. I say, but come on.
Turtles migrate? That's
your timeline must be off. Sea turtles migrate. Sea turtles migrate.
Mm-hmm.
Your timeline must be off. The other thing is the Olmec heads in South America they don't look like Mesoamericans. They look like black people.
Yeah.
And the black people and Australians are black. The Aboriginal Australians are black people.
Okay.
So what if it's not an out of Africa theory, it's an out of Australia theory.
Okay.
And the Garden of Eden is actually in Melbourne. That's my version of being a Mormon.
If I were to pick a place,
and
say this place used to be the Garden of Eden, I don't think Australia would immediately come to mind.
Exactly.
But in a weird way, it sort of makes sense because, the Garden of Eden was paradise and now full of death, which Australia is full of death.
Right. Exactly. People always assume that the before biblical, like the flood, you got the flood, and people assume the rest of the Bible that takes place after the flood happens in roughly the same geographical location.
Mm-hmm.
But if you were going to take that, let's just say you're going to take that story at strictly face value, you don't know where Noah took off from. You just know he landed at Mount Ararat.
Right.
Maybe all those civilizations before that were in Australia.
That was the known world, the pre-flood world was all
Australia.
Yeah,
it was Australia. And that's why it was very easy to flood, because it didn't. Have you ever looked at, I may have mentioned this before, you ever looked at the elevation with megafauna?
I've heard the thing about the Devil's Tower being a giant tree stump, but that's about it.
No, that's not real.
Oh.
But unless it's that's like the roots of Yggdrasil or something.
Okay.
That was the world. No. If you look at elevation in the world, if you get a map of global elevation of the world, and you get a map of where all the megafauna live, like big animals, lions and zebras and stuff, it's like a 1-to-1 match.
How is a zebra a megafauna?
It's a big mega. It's a big animal.
I mean, it's like a regular
megafauna.
Animal.
Megafauna. We're talking about animals of the size and weight of a person.
Okay, bigger than like rodents and stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Like if you walk around large portions of the world, all you're getting is you'll get some deer, okay, but let's leave that aside.
Yeah.
Mostly you get squirrels, foxes, stuff like that. You don't get a lot of big animals like on the Serengeti or the North American Yosemite time, where you have mooses and elk and stuff. You don't get these big animals everywhere, and the places that you do get them they're at these significantly elevated elevations, right? So almost maybe that's where they're still there after the world was flooded and they all drowned, except in the very high parts. I don't know. I'm just saying the possum doesn't make sense, and the monkeys don't make sense. And every turtle biologist I've ever grilled about possums and monkeys doesn't have an answer.
Interesting.
And also other biologists. But
well, that's an interesting kind of interaction with the Noahic flood theory, because if all of mankind was confined to Australia at that time, then you wouldn't really have to flood the whole world. You just have to flood Australia.
Exactly. See what I'm saying? And here's the thing: you know how the world was flooded, right? Was a meteor or comet impact on the ice caps.
Okay, maybe.
Makes total sense. Right? Because that's why, like, where'd the water go? Oh, it's just in the ocean now.
I sort of feel like you're taking a non-necessary anti-supernaturalist position with that.
Maybe, but here's the thing. Where it says the water comes up from the ground.
Mm-hmm.
People think it rains mostly. But it says the gates, the flood waters of the earth were opened and it rose up from the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Where is all the excess? Where do you trap water to then release it later, except in ice? Right?
Yeah.
See what I'm saying?
I do.
See what I'm saying? It's all making sense. This is why the possums. All I'm saying is Noah was an Aboriginal Australian. That's all I'm saying.
Is that all you're saying? Okay.
He knew the dream time well.
Mm-hmm.
He had a boomerang. Noah definitely had a boomerang.
Okay.
And he I don't know what else the Aboriginals do, to be honest. I know they have boomerangs. I went to Australia one time. You ever been to Australia?
No.
I recommend Australia. But there was this Aboriginal guy, and they were doing like it was one of these. It wasn't Ayers Rock, but it was another one of these rocks that the Aboriginals like.
Okay.
Native Americans, they like rocks too.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, oh, this is special spirit rock.
Right.
Same with the Abos.
Mm-hmm.
They, I'm not sure if that's a PC term or not. I heard it there called Abos, but I sort of felt like that was a bad term, but I wasn't sure. But anyway, the Abos. I went to this place and they were giving you like the Aboriginal experience. So like, here's how we hunt with atlatls.
Mm-hmm.
Here's how we throw a boomerang. And I got so into the atlatl thing, which if you don't know is like a spear throwing hand thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was having a lot of fun with that, and they have this very thick accent, the Aboriginals, and he would be like, "Oh, but and I was like, "Yeah," and I'd throw again, and I'd keep doing it, and finally he decided, and then I realized it was all an act.
Mm-hmm.
That he wasn't actually an Aboriginal guy. I think he was just a black man from like Chicago or something. Yeah. And then he just goes. Then he comes up to me and goes, "Look, give the spear to another person. You've been doing it too long." And I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, right, man."
That is.
So
funny.
I don't even know if Aboriginals are real though. Is also the problem, because that one, the couple I interacted with were fake. I think it was just some black guy from America that went over there, and he was like, "Oh, you need a black guy to pretend to be this ancient tribe," and he was sure,
So maybe he's just like an actor in search of work. Went to Australia.
That's what I'm saying, but maybe that's true of all Aboriginals.
Ooh.
I don't know. Boomerangs don't come back, though.
I've never been able to make one come back.
I don't know where that got started. I was there with supposedly professional boomerang throwers, and they're like, it doesn't come back. It might come back on accident.
I feel like Crocodile Dundee memed that into existence, and it's not.
Most of the boomerangs were these big throwing sticks.
Yeah.
You just took a big club that was made to throw, and you threw it at your animal you were hunting. It wasn't meant to. Like, what would be the purpose of it coming? Why would you have a hunting tool that you threw just to come back? It doesn't make any sense.
Right. You still got to go get the bird.
Exactly.
At least have them fall in roughly the same area.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the thing you have to do with I bought a boomerang and brought it back to America, and the first throw I did in America, it broke. And that's Australian quality for you.
So the whole Aboriginal stuff, all of Aboriginal stuff might just be this like Disneyland Australia creation.
Well, yeah, the boomerang that comes back to you definitely is.
No, I had one as a kid. My dad bought me one, and we tried to throw this thing and make it come back, and it would sort of like turn a little bit.
Yeah, but it doesn't.
In the way that like a frisbee turns if you don't throw it right.
Right.
And we just kind of gave up on it and said, maybe there's just some sort of magic that the Aborigine has, but apparently they don't have it either.
No, well, that's like I said, I'm not sure because I don't think I actually met one. I think I just met a guy from Chicago that had moved to Australia. This
conversation is wrecking my worldview back to my childhood.
I know. I'm wrecking everyone's worldview. Noah was an Aboriginal.
Mm-hmm.
Possums you can't account for them.
Mm-hmm.
Can't account for possums, and then you can't account for monkeys. New World monkeys. It's all a big scam.
You've thrown down the gauntlet on the scientific community right now.
I'm going to do that a lot today.
Awesome.
I'm going to do that a lot today. All right, so here's the thing. I'm going to talk about how to be a genius.
Sweet.
Okay, and people say, "Oh, Sumo, are you purporting to be a genius?" No, Mr. Snide commenter. No, but I have known geniuses. Like I work with a guy who I would say is a legit genius.
Okay.
But and all the geniuses I've ever known have something in common, right? Which is like how to balance being a prey animal with being a predator.
Mm-hmm.
Because human beings are both.
Yep.
Right? Like you take the guys on the African savannah, they hunt lions, but they also get hunted by lions.
Mm.
Right? And this is why social justice warriors are like zebras.
What?
Because that's the prey mode.
Mm-hmm.
The prey mode of life is to be like a herd animal, like a zebra. Now, here's the thing about a zebra. Why do zebras have stripes?
I don't know.
I would take a guess.
The camouflage thing never made sense to me. I know that's what they say.
I know. Here's the thing. And people say that, and they don't even realize, like...
It's baloney.
Again, all the turtle biologists don't know about zebras. But the lion is camouflaged because he's the color of grass.
Right. Zebra is not camouflage. You can see that thing from miles away.
He's black and white in the middle of a green world. Right? And he's got stripes on him. But here's the trick. Okay. Some guys were out there, they were doing zebra research, and they were observing individual zebras and watching their behavior. You're watching the zebras, right? Everyone imagine that I have my hands up to my eyes like they're binoculars.
Mm-hmm.
And you're watching the zebras, and what zebra that you've named Concunte, or some African name.
Mm-hmm.
Because they always give just like they give pandas Chinese names, even if they're like in a Kentucky zoo. You have to give a zebra an African name.
Yeah.
Right. So you say you can't just name him John.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't make. So you say there's Concunte, and you say, "Oh, Concunte just did an interesting mating behavior," and then you look down at your notes and you write it down. And you look back up. You're like, which one's Concunte? They all look the same. And so what they did was like, well, I'm interested in these zebras. So they went down, they got in their Jeep, and they had a bit of a paintbrush on a long broomstick.
Mm-hmm.
And they drove up real quick to the running away herd, and they slapped the paint on the back of the haunches. So they could know which was which. Like, you'll be the red painted zebra, and Kunta Kinte will be the blue painted zebra. And
Toby. Which one's Toby?
Toby will be the green, and Hurdy-Gurdy will be the yellow. And then we'll go back and we'll watch them. And so then they go back up the hill, and they put on their binoculars, and Kunta Kinte is being eaten by a lion. And there goes Toby. Oh, man. Oh, dear. They're all being eaten. Oh, no. And then they figured out, you see, that the lions... We always thought lions were sort of sadistic and just went after the weak and the old.
Right.
It's not true. The lions go after the ones they can pick out from the group.
Mm.
right? The camouflage is against the rest of the herd.
Okay, they just become this dazzling, confusing mass.
Right. The camouflage is against the herd. Because in order to organize your hunt as a lion, who are themselves interesting, being the only pack cats, but to organize, or one of the only, but to organize your hunt as a lion, you have to be able to pick one out, because you can't talk and be like, hey, let's get Kunta Kinte.
Right.
Right. And even if you could, you'd be the same as that researcher. You'd look away and like, I lost him. Right. But if one has a limp, if one is very small, then you can pick them out from the herd and organize your hunt around that. And that's why if you paint a zebra, they will die. Right. So if anyone wants to kill zebras, just go paint them, and they will get killed by lions. But it's the same thing with people. You see, that's why the SJW mob, this is the NPC meme. Everyone be the same, be the gray man, and then no one attacks you. Because you look the same as everyone else and are completely forgettable. Right? Which is a long roundabout way of saying the nail that sticks out gets hammered down. But
I thought they were so individual and special and expressing themselves. It's like, I'm gonna have blue hair because I'm gonna be different. So you're telling me that is just sort of this herd behavior, and really they're all doing the same thing?
Exactly. Well, the blue hair, I feel like dyeing your hair an unnatural color, especially in a woman, is a signal of like, you know how snakes that are poisonous have really bright colors?
Yeah.
I think that's what that is. It's like, hey, look, no one date me because I'm
gonna stab you.
Yeah, I think that's what that is.
Okay.
But yeah, on the whole, right? So most of the time in history, including now, right? There are ideas that can get you in trouble, fired, ostracized, even killed, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the ways you avoid those things is you just go along with the herd.
It's like, I'm going to study climate science.
Yeah.
And collect grant money. Yeah.
Which is fine to study climate science, but you need to be the guy going, but what about possums? Right? But here's the thing. How to be a genius. So, like, you look back in history, guys like Michelangelo, Da Vinci, Newton, Niels Bohr, de Broglie, Shakespeare, these guys, okay, it's difficult to explain their accomplishments purely on the basis of IQ. Because, yes, they were smarter than average, but were they that much smarter? It's like, like the strongest guy in the world can deadlift a lot. I think it was just the Thor guy. He just did 1,001 kilograms or something.
Yeah.
Impressive, right? But he can't lift 10 times what an average person can lift.
Right.
Right? It's like let's say the average person can jump 4 feet in the air. Okay, well then the Olympians can't jump 76 feet in the air.
Right.
Right? To account for the accomplishments of someone like Michelangelo or de Broglie or Newton, that's the sort of equivalent. Like, well, average people can jump 4 feet intellectually, and he can jump 1,000. It's like you have to basically posit mental superheroes. Right? That's why I think IQ fetishing is weird and fake.
Yeah.
And probably gay. Because it doesn't, like, I can't explain it. But if you then say, well, actually, they were above average intelligence. They're like the Olympians of intellect. But that doesn't mean they're superhuman. But they did have a different perspective than the average. So, like, one of the things that hold you down at any age is there's some assumptions about the fundamental nature of how things work that are wrong.
Yep.
And you're operating on all these assumptions, and then you're trying to fit square pegs into round holes to make them stick. Like, for instance, trying to keep insisting that people came out of Africa in the face of possums and New World monkeys. Right? And you end up with all these absurdities, like a biologist in saying, well, maybe they come over on a spontaneous land raft. And you're like, that's retarded. Like, there's never been a spontaneous land raft, A, and B, if there was, they would have to a breeding population would have to be on this raft. They would also need to have food and water on the whole. It doesn't make any sense. There were not ancient monkey pirates. It just didn't happen, right? And but people like Michelangelo say they have a slightly different cosmology, a slightly different metaphysic they're working with that's closer to reality than the prevailing zeitgeist of the time.
Okay.
Right? And that's how they're able to make all these big leaps, because they're working on a slightly different metaphysical model. Because you really can't, I mean, maybe there are intellectual superheroes, but I have trouble thinking that, like, people are just that far out. Do you know what I mean?
I do. And I think that this kind of ties in nicely with our idea that anybody can do science.
Right. Anybody can do science.
Because it's more about your perspective and your attitude than it is about your IQ or your funding.
Yes. Yeah. Well, like, so if you're a zebra, if you're a herd animal, you're one of these people that's just trying to camouflage them against the herd so people don't yell at them, right? Well, the other thing, one, you can't see very far anyway, because when you look around, you just see other zebra butts.
Yep.
Right? That's why you're on Twitter or you're on Facebook, and you're like, I have correct opinion. And other people go, thumbs up, I also have correct opinion. And all you see is zebra butts. Right? That's all you get everywhere. So one, you don't see anything beyond zebra butts. But then two, herd animals are very habitual, and they travel the same path. They go to waterhole A, they go to grassland B, they go to waterhole C, and then back to waterhole A. Right? Mm-hmm. They don't like to try it because going new places is dangerous. Right? There's predators in the grass, and you don't want to step out of line and get the lions to look at you. Right? So, but if you're willing to get, then you can go like, oh, well, I went to waterhole E, and over there, actually, the Earth is round. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right? Because everyone in Galileo's time is at waterhole A, where the Earth is flat, and then they go over to waterhole. Well, they didn't think that, but you know what I mean. We're geocentric.
Sure.
Where the Earth, and then he goes over. Well, actually, over at waterhole E, it's heliocentric, and they're like, oh, I don't know about waterhole E, you know. And then they because he's the zebra standing out, he gets attacked, right? Mm-hmm. By the see, it's in the physical realm that's true, you know. Like, people even scoff at you for doing things that the herd doesn't do in the physical realm, like sleeping in a van, maybe, or going overseas by yourself and wandering around, you know, because of how dangerous it is, and it is dangerous. They're right. You know, like the first time I went to Rome, I got in a cab with a fake cab driver, because I got there like 2 a.m, and all the cab, and he was like, hey, I'll take you to the place you want to go. Hey. That's how everyone in Rome talks. And
it's a me, Mario.
It's a me, Mario. And so I was like, okay, and I get in there, charges me this exorbitant amount, and I was like, that seems like a lot. I was like, I'm not real versed on the value of the euro. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing. I've been around Europe for a while then, and the thing about the euro, at least at the time, was that it was completely fake and gay. Because everything, like, you would go to Germany, and it'd be like a Snickers bar, and I ate a lot of Snickers bars, you know. Mm-hmm. And the Snickers bars would be like 30 cents in Germany. Mm-hmm. Then you go to France, and it's like, oh, Snickers bar be 3 euros. You're like, what? It's the same currency. Why is the same thing across this border 10 times as much?
Yeah, it's not really the same currency then, because the value changed.
Yeah. And then you go to Spain, and it'd be some other price. And so I get to Italy, and the guy's like, you know, it's 200 euros for this. I was like, that seems like quite a lot, but also I don't know if Italy is just super poor. So I was like, how about I give you 100 euros? I don't know. It's 2 a.m. And he's like, oh, okay, fine. And then, you know, I find out that he's some guy that just pretends to be a cab, and that's illegal in Italy.
Dude, you just exposed the whole euro fraud. If we can take a brief aside here, think in an economy that works like that, think of how much money you could make in arbitrage between low cost and high cost markets on certain goods.
Well, that's why they want it to continue, because the people
Getting fleeced.
People have a vested interest in keeping it that way because you have tremendous arbitrage profits.
Getting absolutely fleeced on Snickers. Holy cow! So me not having been to Europe, I've not experienced the euro thing.
Yeah, the euro. I've been to Europe in both pre-euro and post-euro, and it really is very similar in the price differences.
They don't use the euro anymore. Where have I been? What? I know UK doesn't use it.
No, pre-euro, like before the euro was really widely.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Like the Germans, the Deutsche Marke. I'm going to say the relative value of a euro in Germany to a euro in Italy was roughly the same,
right,
as the value of a Deutsche Mark back in the day. You know, so I'm not really sure how that worked. I'm not an economist. You know, don't add us here, but. You know, or like, you know, so if you're in Rome, it can be dangerous. Like the first time I went to, well, not the first time, but one time I went to Houston without a car and I had to walk around, and people were like, "Hey, look, you know, some parts of Houston can be pretty rough. Be careful if you don't know where you're going." And of course, I ended up in the worst parts of Houston, and had to, you know, and there was like people looking at me, and it's like it is physically dangerous for the zebras to wander away from the established paths. Right? It's intellectually dangerous. People don't want to look foolish. They don't want to look dumb. Like you get on Facebook and you say, I think the thing that is standard, sin. People are like, good job thinking the thing that is standard. Sin. You know? and because you don't want to lose the public opinion of you, which can happen if you step out there. If you're an academic, you don't want to lose funding, you know, for having a non-respectable opinion. In the spiritual realm, sometimes, you know, if you have the wrong theology, your imam might have you thrown off a roof, or you might have the Spanish Inquisition after you, right?
Yeah.
Sadly, a lot of people seem to think that the main lion in the spiritual realm is God himself, which I don't think is true. Like a lot of people they have this idea that like, well, I need to make sure I don't think anything heterodox ever, because God will get mad at me if I do, and throw me into hell. And then even if I'm wrong and this doesn't make any sense to me, I'll continue to say it. And then my excuse will be, well, all the priests told me that was what it was. So I'm clear.
Right.
It's a safe option. Right. And I don't think it works like that. But a lot of people have this fear like, well, even if my theology is wrong, I have an excuse. And so God can't be mad at me.
Well, I think so. I even think sometimes in spiritual matters that's valid. Because if you're faced with something you can't resolve.
Right.
And you say, well, I know that this particular spiritual authority in my life has been good and otherwise trustworthy. I'm just going to go with what they say until I have evidence to the contrary. That's a valid way to form your spiritual worldview.
Agreed. However, when you run into things that are like clearly contradictory.
Yeah, sure.
You need to work them out.
True.
Right? And if that involves, like, I don't think God gets mad at you for if I thought God was mad at you for having heterodox beliefs, I would be in rough shape.
Yeah.
You know, because I'm always like entertaining. I don't necessarily accept them, but I'm like, what if, you know, and then some, like, what if there is reincarnation in Christianity? You know, I'll throw that out there. And then, you know, you work like, well, what is he talking about, John, being really Elijah? Because I'd ask that, and people be like, well, it means some vague aphorism about, you know, a metaphor. And I'm like, that is not really a satisfactory answer, you know. But at the same time, like on the same token, when you're a zebra, you don't want to be overly courageous, right? Yeah. You don't want to, because the guys that are, you know, like in politics, like Milo had this problem. Like, you remember Milo?
Oh, yeah.
Monopolist.
Yeah.
there's a certain kind of gay that's super aggressive.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you've met this kind of gay very much. But
Yeah, I have.
I have a whole taxonomy of gay. Maybe one day we'll go through. But there's this one kind of gay man that's pretty aggressive. And that was sort of like Milo. He'd get out there and he'd just get on his speeches and he'd be like, you're dumb, you're retarded, blah, 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 talking to everybody. And so all the lions gathered around him and took him down. Right? And so in large part, being a genius is being able to step outside the herd just enough where you have a new perspective, but not enough to where you die. Because there were a lot of would-be Galileos or Copernicuses that were killed before they even got their message out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's one of the things. Now I have a great example of all of this. A great example of all this from the world of karate.
Okay.
The world of karate. Now, our listeners are not probably aware, but I spent a large part of my life doing karate, which I like to say like that just to be a weeb.
Sure.
But it's just karate, right? I did a lot of karate. And I did karate at a time when MMA was just starting. Okay. And MMA was to karate what had about the same effect that the acceptance of Darwinian evolution had on religion.
Okay.
Because it was a lot of people were, you do all these forms, you do your they call them kata, which is just Japanese for form, where you do this weird, it looks like a dance. You've seen them doing that. They're by themselves doing like a floor routine. It looks like a gymnastics floor routine sort of, but they have their hands open and they're going back and forth, and kicking in the air, turning around. And everyone was like, somehow this teaches you to fight. Right? Everyone's like, somehow this teaches you to fight. It helps you get in shape, sure. The moves are difficult and you do them fast. There's a good aerobic workout there. But also somehow, and then what had happened by, let's say, well, really by at least the mid 80s, but definitely by the 90s, was that most people just treated them as this weird dance you had to learn to get your next belt. But really karate was basically boxing with kicks thrown in, and you'd practice that most of the time. And then on the side, you did this kata stuff just because it was traditional. Right? But no one really knew what it was. But so there was this large industry of old karate masters with beer bellies who would try to explain the karate katas, the forms, and what they were doing. And they had some of the most ranging from esoteric, like summoning your chi to banish spirits or something, to like the most impractical stuff. Like, well, here you grab, what you're doing here is you're blocking his punch, and then you're karate chopping his balls. And then he dies, and you spin around, you do the same thing to another guy. Right? And then he dies, and then you have to do a flying front kick to a third guy. And this kata is about you fighting 10 people. This kata trains you how to fight 10 people. Right? And just nonsense. Like I remember there was this one move where your hand comes up like a punch, except it's flat. You hold it like a flat piece of paper, like you're playing paper, rock, scissors. And it sort of comes up like at an angle, like almost in a Nazi salute. Okay. Like imagine you step forward and punch a Nazi salute. Right? And people are like, this is a certain type of striking technique where it's we call it a ridge hand. And you go up and you flip your hand, your knuckle of your thumb into the person's temple, and they go out. And then you're like, well, why wouldn't you just, if you're going to go to that trouble, why wouldn't you just punch him in the nose? Right? This is like this is a very small target to hit on a moving person that isn't going to be as hurtful as just aiming for their big face. Right. Like, why would, like, it didn't, and so anyway, MMA comes along and people are like, oh, well, you just You just punch each other. What are you guys doing with all your weird and your crazy interpretations and your pajamas? And it caused what I would consider a mini version of the same spiritual crisis. Mm-hmm. Like there was this one guy, I forget his name, maybe Rob Redford something. Mm-hmm. It was something very double R's. And he ran this blog for a long time. I think it started in like 1994, back when blogs were not a thing. 1994. It's called 24 Angry Chickens or 24 Fighting Chickens. And and in 24 Fighting Chickens, it was his log of his descent into disillusionment with karate. Like he first starts, he's like, "Oh, this is so great! I live in Okinawa and I eat sushi and I kick people, even though I'm from Georgia." And then he moves back to Atlanta, and then he's like, "Well," and so he starts, he's like, "This is all dumb and it doesn't work, meh." And then that's what everyone on the internet gets to eventually, just going meh.
Yeah,
just like meh.
I'm gonna skip to that.
And then, so anyway, Rob culminates his life of discontent on the internet in maybe 2008, something.
Wow.
With a 330-page document he publishes.
Good night.
It was pure autism about how kata, the war dances of Shotokan. Where he goes, "Look, I've looked at all of this stuff. I've gone every interpretation of these kata I can imagine, and there's nothing to them. All of this is bullshit, and these are just ancient war dances that somehow got provided in there. You could do them for a historical preservation society if you want to, but they have nothing to do with self-defense or fighting."
So you're saying it's more like the New Zealand Maori Haka thing? Okay.
Right. It's like a New Zealand Maori Haka. And that's all it is, right? And he has this giant screen, and it's very like, you read it and it sounds almost like a new atheist attacking Christianity. It's like, well, but you're summoning chi? I'm sure that open hand strike to the knee is really going to take him out. So that was the state of karate for a while. And a lot of people, there was a mass exodus out of karate over this movement.
Yeah.
People were like, well, my thing with pajamas isn't good. I need to go do this other thing with pajamas and do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And that'll be right. Because real fighting always involves rolling around on the floor in pajamas.
Yeah, right.
That's how self-defense happens.
What happens when his buddy comes up and kicks you in the head while you're grappling? I mean, come on.
Right.
Get serious.
I've done Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu also. It's a great thing to do. I enjoy it. It's great. It's pretty good for one-on-one stuff. But look, if you actually get mugged, don't do that.
Yeah.
Because someone else, like muggers seldom work alone.
Yeah.
FYI. Right, and they're often like, so you're just gonna get stuck. Just don't do that. And if the guy has a knife on him in his pocket, and you're like, "Here, let's cuddle for a minute.
Right.
I'll get my pajamas. You get your pajamas. I don't want to give you my money, but let's cuddle." He could easily reach into his pocket. I mean, it's just not a good self-defense mechanism. Mm-hmm. On the whole. Okay. And so people were like, and then they're like, well, I'll do MMA, I'll go punch and kick. I'll learn Muay Thai boxing. A lot of guys decided to strip shirtless and go to Thailand and work out in those outdoor gyms where they are covered under bamboo thatches or whatever they do. And that was the state for like a while. Okay. But so here's the point. All over the globe, literally over the whole world, because karate was a worldwide thing. Mm-hmm. With, a million or so people. I'm not sure how many people have ever practiced it, but it's in the millions.
Yeah. Okay.
No one, not one person, regardless of how long they had studied it, how much in-depth research they had done, anything, had any explanation for what kata were. We did them, and that was it. right? Then along comes this fella, pretty much at the end, right on the tail end of when Rob publishes his 330-page scree about, why I'm leaving karate, which was very much like why I'm leaving the Christian faith. There comes this guy named Ian Abernathy from Cumbria, which is right south of Scotland. It's in England, but it's basically, they sound Scottish, And I've met him. He's a burly man, bald, nice fella. And his accent, I could describe his accent like this. When he says the word head height kick, right? It took me like a week. I was trying to figure out what he was talking about with an Eddite kick. I was like, what is he talking about, an Eddite? What is an Eddite? And he was saying head height.
Gotcha.
Head height kick. He was going, Eddite kick. That's how he, all right. So anyway, he's this sort of guy. All right. He comes along and he starts publishing these DVDs, because it was at the time of DVDs, of his kata interpretations. And you would look at it, and all of a sudden this guy out of almost Scotland, he comes along and he says, oh, here's what they mean. And it was immediately apparent that, of course, that's what they meant. Like, he just blew everyone's minds. It was like a riddle, like you don't know the answer to a riddle, but when someone tells you the answer, it's immediately obvious that's the answer.
What was the answer?
He said, well, here's the thing. Look, when you turn right or left in a kata, it's not telling you to turn right because there's a guy coming from your right. It's describing how you should be in relation to an opponent that is currently in front of you. And so what he says was like if it's trying to tell you a series of moves to do in a certain type of scenario, it can't show you on a single person because the other person isn't there. So how do you describe your movement in relation to another person? You just move yourself. So if you want to say, well, in this move, get to the right of your opponent or get to 45 degrees, right? You turn to 45 degrees. And you're just fighting one guy. And this is like when you spin around, it's saying, okay, now get to the back of him. Right?
Oh, so really you should be orbiting a point.
You're orbiting a point.
Yeah.
You're not traversing. He's like, like you're the center here. It's geo-centered. Like it's you-centric.
Right.
And that's how your coordinate system works. It's not like there's a arbitrary coordinate system in space you're floating around.
So had everyone also been doing the katas wrong?
Yes, and he would ask these things, and he was like, "What's going on?" But he was the zebra that was willing to get out from the herd because he became more orthodox by being a heretic. Like he was like, "I think everyone on the globe is wrong, but also that the traditional thing we're doing, the people that laid this down weren't stupid."
Yeah.
So he was a traditionalist by rejecting everything that was traditional. Like all the stuff that people have been teaching for the past 100 years, he was like, that's wrong. I'm going to go back even further. Right? And so he has a hymn. He's like, it's a person-centric coordinate system. And it was immediately apparent, like all these weird things, it's like, well, if they're actually spinning around the guy and doing that ridge hand, doesn't that look a lot more like you're coming around their neck for a choke, and it's exactly what it looks like now.
Wow.
Right? If you, it's not some weird strike to the temple. It's like go around their neck, and it's like everyone in the karate world was like, wow, no one saw this for ages. And then
how many hundred years was this not understood by practitioners of karate?
Well, like 100. At least 100, because karate started in Okinawa, right, which is and then it got to mainland Japan sort of in the pre-World War II era, right? Yep. But it's not clear that. So anyway, it goes all around the globe, and no one has any idea because it just gets lost in translation, basically. Because it comes from Kung Fu, which has the same. This is the thing, though no one understood it. They had kept it preserved. It was like people copying an ancient language down in manuscript that no one knew how to read. They preserved it perfectly. Like if you go to a Shaolin temple in China, they're doing the same kata basically with minor adaptations that people are doing in, Tennessee.
Okay.
Right. And this kata is probably quite old, like 1,000 years or so. They've preserved without knowing its meaning. Like maybe the Chinese did know its meaning. I don't know. But in the Western world, no idea. Right. So it had been preserved, but it was like, we don't know. And then along comes Ian and he's like, well, you got your coordinate system wrong. It's you-centered. Like the 0x0y is on the person, no matter where he is. Right. Mm-hmm. And then that changes the entire thing. All of a sudden, this comes out of nowhere. Right. And it's like, so that has I've always kept that in my head, like, oh, well, you can have all of the right, like, words of the dogma. Yeah. But not have the interpretive key. Like, you can have your coordinate system off, and it makes the whole thing into nonsense.
One bad assumption.
Okay, so with that in mind, we are now going to talk about the flat Earth. The Earth is not flat, first of all, okay? The Earth is not flat. The Earth this is not a flat Earth podcast. Okay? This is not a flat Earth, but I'm going to make a point here, okay? That's all I'm saying. I'm just making... Right. Okay. The Earth is not flat, so don't freak out, everybody. I'm not going to start telling you that gravity isn't real or, whatever. But
there was a time of a few months ago you were trying to convince me of flat Earth theory, and I think it was just a LARP.
Yeah, well, that's what I do. You know what you got to do? I make this pledge to every conspiracy theory, is that I will try very hard to believe it, and then if it fails, then I know that it's not real, or at least I'm pretty sure. Okay. And so when so many people were like, "Hey, flat Earth," I was like, you know what? I'll give it a try.
I remember this. It was a weird time.
I was like, I'm really going to try to get into this flat Earth thing and just see, But here's the thing. It made me think. I got a different perspective. I went to a different watering hole. And another fellow that did the same was that Jonathan Pajot I've mentioned before. He wrote an article in, I think, 2014. It was called, "The Earth Isn't Flat, Except Most of the Time It Is." Right, which is a great article. And he brings up some interesting points. This is fun. So I talked about how to be a genius by getting a different perspective. And now we're going to talk about like how science does this. Science pits observation against observation. Okay, so like people like Neil deGrasse Tyson and Carl Sagan and all these guys, these popular science men, they're fond of saying stuff like, we're actually just an unexceptional planet on an average-sized star in a part of the galaxy with no particular significance. They like to say stuff like that. Like it's this put down centric model, right? It's like, life is an accident and there's no real meaning to things, and you just do what you want, and, people be like, look at that pretty bird. And they'll be like, that bird is an invasive species and it eats its own poo. No matter what you do, they like to be like, here's why it's bad. But here's the thing. Here's the trick. You can describe anything in a way that makes it sound terrible. Yeah. Like playing the violin is just scraping horsehair over cat intestines. It's just scraping horsehair over cat intestines. That's all it is,
All that sound is just going to dissipate into the universe, and it's not going to mean anything at the end of the day.
Yeah, because but see, here's the thing. In point of fact, regardless of your perspective, the Earth, if you just think about it for 5 seconds, it's obvious that we're not an unexceptional planet because we have life on it. Right? We haven't seen that anywhere else. Mm-hmm. So the idea is that the Earth is an unexceptional planet, when it's like, okay, but no. Right. Right. And Also, our place in the galaxy is of particular importance because we're the only ones that so far that we know has even come up with the idea of importance or non-importance parts of the galaxy.
Yep.
Right? Like this is the only part of the galaxy where such judgments are being made.
Yep.
Right? This is the only part where what is and isn't a unique star is being defined.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that, by definition, makes this an interesting spot. So, and what they like to do, what science takes as a default position is they like to tell us that we say like, oh, I think that things have meaning and that love is real and that, there's right and wrong. And they go, well, I know you observed that, but actually our observation is that we're nobodies and nothing matters and love is just a chemical in your brain. You're having a chemical reaction, That's the main. That's how they all operate. They always do that, and you can always do that. You can always find language to describe whatever it is in a way that makes it sound horrible, or alternatively, you can describe things in a way that makes it sound great. Anything you want, So which do you want to do? Is the question. Like which sort of person do you want to listen to? Okay. So now let's talk about the Earth. The Earth. So here's the thing. When you go outside, the Earth appears to you and to your senses exactly as it did to the ancients.
Yeah.
The Earth appears to be fixed. It appears to be flat. There's a dome over your head, a firmament, and the sun, moon, and stars move around it through the sky. All right, and then the scientist comes along and says, "Well, actually, the Earth doesn't move. The sun doesn't move. The Earth moves, and the stars don't move. You spin, and you're not still. You're actually rotating at a bazillion miles an hour through space." And everything that you perceive is completely backwards. It's actually 100% the opposite. And you see what's going on here. They say, well, your observation is X, but the real observation is 1 over X.
Right.
Your observation is this. The real observation is 180 degrees the opposite. Okay. And then people were like, well, yeah, that's what it is, though. All right. So here's the thing. So if there is no center of the universe, right, which is what they say, you can choose anything as your center, right? Like you could choose the sun as the center if you want to, but you could also choose the Earth as the center. You could choose Milwaukee as the center. You could choose the moon. You could choose some random point between Neptune and Pluto.
Yeah. You
could choose any point as the center. So why not make as your zero coordinate the place where measurements are in fact made? Does that make sense? Like on Earth, because look, if you make the Earth the sun the center of the solar system, all of the planets make these very sort of boring ellipses, which are really circles. I don't know why they keep going with this ellipse thing. They're basically circles. It's like they're slightly non-circular, but come on.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway. It's like when they say the Earth is an oblate spheroid. Like, it's a sphere. Just shut up. It's like off of being a sphere by like 0.3 or something. Just, it's a sphere. Like, it's a slightly deformed sphere.
Right.
An oblate sphere. Okay. Anyway, so, but if you make the Earth the center, if you say, well, actually, I'm just going to act like the Earth is unmovable and the sun goes around it and all the moon, then all of the orbits of the planets become this beautiful spirograph. Absolutely gorgeous. And you can look this up online because the math is equivalent either way. And motion is relative. So you can be like, if you're in space and you throw a baseball, well, that's not because if you're in space and you shoot a gun, are you moving away from the bullet or is the bullet moving away from you?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It's equivalent. Or are you both moving apart at half speed? right? All three interpretations are equivalent. So why not go with the interpretation that the zero coordinate is where the measurements are actually made? Do you see?
Yeah. I mean, if we're going to embrace relativity and relative thinking, we can pick our 0 point for whatever we want.
We can pick our 0 point for whatever we want. That's right. So why not do it that it's more beautiful if you choose a geocentric orbits are far more beautiful. And B, it sort of makes sense because why pick the sun? Nothing's going on at the sun. By your own admission, the sun is an average-sized star of no particular importance.
Mm-hmm.
Just like that doesn't make any sense. Just choose the place that has sentient life on it, right? And then you say, but the sun isn't really orbiting around the Earth, and it's like, no, it actually is. It's equivalent. It is both mathematically. I know this is a controversial statement because people have been hammered in their heads their whole life.
Yeah.
But it is actually equivalent because if you have two balls in space, which is orbiting the other? Mm-hmm. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. And in fact, if you are doing, and I have done a small bit of work in a NASA thing, in a NASA context. If you are trying to launch rockets from Earth to, say, Mars or Moon or whatever, in fact, most of the time, aerospace engineers will use a geocentric model because the math is easier.
Yeah.
We'll just say, well, let's just pretend where we are is 0 and it stays 0. And then we'll just, and then we'll, as we go out, the other planets move because that makes the math easier. When you want to actually do things, you actually pretend that the Earth is still. And it's even easier to calculate when the planets are going to come around next if you just pretend the Earth is still, rather than pretending the sun is still. Right?
So you can do accurate astronomy predictions based on the Earth-centric model?
Of course. And that's what they did for thousands of years before Galileo said don't do that anymore.
Mm.
They could still tell when Neptune was going to appear in the sky, and they could calculate it exactly. Like, oh, it's going to appear in the sky, way before they had a heliocentric model.
Well, isn't that one of the primary judges of whether a model is valid or not? Or can it make valid, good predictions about the future?
Yeah, exactly. And you can do, and what my point is, you can make valid predictions about the future if your coordinate system, because that's all we're talking about, is where is the 0 point of this 3D coordinate system? Is it here on Earth or is it over at the sun? And it doesn't make any difference. So why not choose here? So there's my argument A for geocentrism. Okay, now I'm going to walk you back to flat Earth. Except I'm not. The Earth isn't flat. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying.
Okay. You're just saying.
We're just follow me here. All right. So, but see, here's the rub. Modern science, when given a choice, modern science will always choose not man.
Yeah.
They will always choose, well, we're not going to put our coordinate system here because that's where people are. Put it somewhere over there. Right? They will always choose what is ugly instead of what is beautiful. Like, I know these orbits aren't as beautiful, but let's just use them instead because it's not man-centric.
Right.
It's an entirely put-down theory of the universe. Like, they do this with everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like dolphins. Take dolphins. They'll be like dolphin. David Attenborough will be on there giving a documentary about dolphins, and they'll be like, the pod of dolphins engages in ritualistic play to build social bonding. This will help them have greater group cohesion and ensure survival of the young in the days to come, giving them an evolutionary advantage. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they describe the dolphins playing in terms of staying alive.
Yeah.
And it's like, guys, that's exactly backwards. The dolphins do not play in order to live. The dolphins live in order to play. Of course, that's what they're doing. Right. Like, what? Why are you're it's like they do this with everything. Like when you play music, they're like, music comes from, in tribal times, music was used as a form of ritualistic orgy initiation and to form group cohesion through ritualistic dance and coordinated movements, which helped ensure group cooperation and group survival, right? And then you're like, but that's not actually what it feels like I'm doing when I'm playing ukulele or playing Rachmaninoff on the piano.
Right.
It's like, that isn't my observation. My observation is that I'm doing X because it is beautiful and fun. And they're like, well, actually, it's 1 over X. You're doing what seems beautiful and fun because you are doing it for a subconscious reason to get laid.
So no wonder everybody has such, anxiety and psychological discontentment when the model that we've been hammered into ourselves our whole life doesn't really describe our own motives for doing things.
Right. And it doesn't even describe your own experience. It's like this. It's like everything you do, they say it looks like X, but actually it's the opposite.
Right.
They do that with everything. Okay. Now, and really, really, all Darwinian evolution is, and I'm not against it, but let's be real here. All Darwinian evolution is basically it's a bunch of flowery terms and long tomes written to justify a fundamental position, which is that everything exists just to get laid. Right? That's all it is. It's like everything is about sex and reproduction.
Mm-hmm.
That every single thing is like music is about sex and reproduction, and art was like helping you coordinate like how you're going to do your next hunt. So you paint it on the cave wall so you get the food, so the women would like you more, so you could have sex with them. It's like they interpret. This is my main art. This is my main thing I do not like about the whole right wing sort of pickup artistry and men women thing, because they also adhere to this, like everything is secretly done for some sexual reason.
Right.
It's like women don't, I don't know, men do this because it's peacocking for sexuality or whatever. It's like, just, I mean, sex is a motivator in people's lives, no doubt, but it's not the only thing.
But just think about the people in your lives that attribute base motives to everything and everyone else's stuff. Right. Those aren't happy, well-adjusted people.
No.
Yeah.
No. And I think a lot of it is it's this sort of spiteful like attitude. Like a lot of scientists are not the kind of people that run and play outside.
Yeah.
Right? They don't swim in the ocean. They live in dark basements and they count beans and they type on computers.
Yeah.
And women don't really like them that much. And so they say, well, actually the world is the opposite of all those things that other people want to do. The real thing is what I'm doing, and I'm going to put the center somewhere else so you people are put down.
It's sort of like a lot of atheist arguments are really not effective in disproving the existence of God. They're really more complicated ways to say why I don't like God.
Yeah, they're complicated ways of saying why I don't like God and why everything is really about sex.
And so, and in that way, I think a lot of these scientific and evolutionary arguments are, sort of a person who's dissatisfied with their performance in the world and are coming up with really complicated ways to justify it.
Well, I would go even more base than that. I'd say it's people that are unsatisfied with their performance in bed. And they're coming up with really crazy ways to be like, well, actually what I'm doing is actually makes me sexually alpha.
Right.
It's like, no, what? But when you look at it, when you actually get to it, it's like, yeah, well, all the dolphins are doing that just because they want to have more sex. And it's like, that's not, you guys just have sex on the brain.
Yeah.
Right? And that's all that means. Right?
And I find it interesting, that the generations raised on Darwinianism have given rise to a hypersexualized culture.
Yeah, because that's all there is. All nature exists is the selfish gene. It's natural selection, sexual selection. That's all that exists, right? And I had this friend in middle school. He was a depressed sort of guy. He had a rough upbringing. I think there was probably various forms of abuse in his past as a child, And he lived in filth. Like his mother was on drugs and she didn't clean up the house. And, he tried, but, he's a kid. And he had all these people over all the time that were messing up the house. And he told me this theory one time. He said he thought that everything existed just to poop.
Interesting.
Like he really said that. He's like, well, here's the thing. Listen and see if this doesn't sound like the exact same logic. He'd be like, well, people go to work so they can get food so they can poop. Or people have sex to make babies who then can perpetuate more pooping. And he would really say this, like, it was half joking, but he was actually sort of serious.
Yeah.
But that's because he came from extremely sort of shitty life, and so his worldview was shit-centric.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But that's the same thing as making that's the point. You can pick anything as center. And that you can follow that logic. You can make Captain Crunch the center.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the whole universe has been this giant thing which produces the conditions that make the production of Captain Crunch cereal inevitable.
And so the most enlightened person is the one that enjoys the most Captain Crunch?
Yeah, you could totally make that argument using all these same tricks.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or you could say, like, life exists to grow fingernails. You know, people go out and they hunt food so they can kill their meat and ingest it so they can grow more fingernails. And they have to grow more fingernails, but the life perpetuates by those that have the sex that get the more fingernails that are grown with the new babies. And that's what drives it.
So is the heliocentric view of the universe, of the solar system, really sort of sun worshippers trying to normalize their fetish? Or their religion?
I wouldn't say that. I would say it's just people they want to put the center somewhere else other than man.
Okay.
Wherever it is. But like I said, you can do that with anything. You can make the same logic that allows you in Darwinianism to be like, well, everything is about sex. You could say, well, everything's about poop, or everything's about fingernails, or Captain Crunch, or making Whataburgers. Like, you can do that with anything. You could be like, well, all of evolution was this process to get to the place where people could make Whataburgers.
Yeah.
And like the natural selection was driven on a path that produced Whataburgers.
At least Whataburgers are creative. You know, it's something humans do instead of, you know, something slugs do. Yeah.
Like, you know, and so when they're like, life is just an accident, you know, it's just blah. It's the same problem as when in karate we didn't have the right coordinate system.
Yeah.
We had this other coordinate system, and then all we're doing came out meaningless. But the moment you put the coordinate system on the person, it all snaps into focus. You see?
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's what I'm arguing. And so when I say, look, when I say, like, look, let's think about actually geocentrism for a second, or even flat Earth. Like, the Earth isn't. Here's the thing: the Earth isn't like Pajot said. The Earth isn't flat, except most of the time it is.
Right.
And what he's saying there is like 99.999999999% of human experience is of a flat Earth.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you experience. And it is only when you go into some very extreme scenario, like when you're in a spaceship, that it appears otherwise. Right? And so his thing was like, well, why take the... And the Earth seems fixed and unmovable, you know, unless there's an earthquake. Mm-hmm. So he's like, why is it default that we take the least actually experienced observation as what is the most real? Like you look at a surface and you say, oh, that's clean. I just cleaned it. And then a scientist comes along and gets his microscope. It's like, oh, you think it's clean, but look through this piece of technology. And now it is not clean anymore, is it?
Yeah.
You see, now it's all filthy. It all goes back to filth. Mm. And then, you know, or like, oh, you think nothing's here, but let me look at my instrument. You see these needles going up and down? There's tons of stuff here. You see? And this is not me being anti-science, but there is a question of why we think that reality is more real if viewed through an apparatus. Yeah.
It's an assumption of kind of a technophiliac assumption of things.
Yeah, it's like, is it actually more real if it's viewed through an apparatus? And is that assumption why everyone's looking at a screen all day?
Right. I had somebody ask me about gardening. Wanted to start a garden, and he started asking all these questions about growing food in half PVC pipes and hydroponics and aeroponics and all this stuff. And I said, "Well, do you have room in your house to build all this stuff?" And he said, "Well, no." And then I said, "Well, do you have a backyard that gets sun on it?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, why are you asking me about weird PVC pipe apparatuses and pumping systems and electronic grow lights when you don't have anywhere to put them?" And he says, I don't know." Yeah, I didn't have an answer.
Yeah,
I said, why is that assumption there? Why was that your starting place? Why was that your zero coordinate that I'm going to build a high-tech apparatus to grow friggin' vegetables?
Right. Well, and it's this way everywhere. Like, I go outside and I see a world in which there's different people. There's lots of different kinds of people. And mostly all the time they get along and no one is shouting or shooting each other. And, we have a nice time.
Yeah.
But then people are like, no, look, in my screen, it says that there's like Muslim terrorists everywhere and white supremacists and the Mexicans are all going to destroy us. And we, yeah. And it's like, and the virus is killing lots of thousands. Like, this is what the screen says. Mm-hmm. And the screen is more real.
Yeah.
Right? The screen is more real. And it's just like when someone says, it's clean. No, it isn't. Look through this piece of glass. Or the earth seems to be fixed. No, it isn't. Look through this piece of glass. Right? And so what I'm trying to get people to see is that if you actually take this idea that everything is relative, then any position can be taken, which is actually true because you can make anything the center of the universe. You can make pooping or Captain Crunch or Whataburgers or sex. Then why not choose as the center what makes everything the most beautiful?
Yeah.
Because you can do that, right? But here's the problem. The thing you get when you decide to take this, when you decide to take the put down theory of the universe where, playing the violin is just scraping cat's hair over horse intestines or horse hair over cat intestines, and that nothing matters and that everything's just about sex and it's just dog eat dog world, you don't have any responsibility. You don't have to change. Everything's, you're fine just the way you are because you're shit and so is everything else. Mm-hmm. You don't have to, you don't have to feel guilty about your bad things that you do. You don't have to strive for something better. And that's the payoff you get. Now, the price you pay is that nothing matters and everyone's depressed all the time. Yeah. But maybe that's a good deal, right? Maybe that's actually worth it. Maybe that's why so many people take it, because there's because feeling like guilt, like you don't match up to the great cosmic standard, is a pretty big weight to bear.
Yeah, it is.
So maybe you don't want to do it, but maybe you do. And if you do, then if you do choose as your center, like what is most beautiful, what is most good, what is most true, in fact, even God himself, right? If you make that the center, then a lot of stuff snaps into focus, just like those karate kata. Nothing made sense until you put it on the right center, right? And now the same set of facts have a totally different meaning. But that comes at the cost of, well, now I got to try. And now I can be held accountable for not trying enough. Right? Yeah. And that's a pretty big price.
Yeah. It's a heavy weight.
So maybe you don't want to do it, but the alternative, I think, is worse. But so I'm just saying, don't be fooled by people that want to take away your experience. The fundamental thing is the felt experience of the individual, because that's all you have to work with, really. Mm-hmm. And when you're letting people be like, I know you experience X, but actually it's the exact inverse of what you experienced.
And it's funny because we're myself included, are so well trained to say, oh, well, the subjective experience of the individual, that's not the whole of the truth. Really, the truth is coming out of this machine that collates all the outlier data from all around the world and history and condenses it into this report of insanity.
Yeah.
And that's reality. Well, no, it's not. It isn't. And that it's not really helpful to look at that and try to come up with some sort of plan to deal with the world in which I live.
Exactly true. And it's like I always have this craziness. I feel like I don't like. Are you people listening? Like, what did 20th century physics tell you except that objective, subjective, same.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was the whole revelation in like the observer phenomenon and the collapse of the wave function. Like it's like, well, I objectively see. It's like, no, you don't.
Yeah.
It's like when you look through a microscope, you're having another subjective experience.
Yeah.
Right? Just because, like, why are your eyes untrustworthy just looking around, but they suddenly become trustworthy when you look through a piece of glass?
Yeah.
Doesn't make it.
Yeah.
It doesn't. You're still using your eyeball. You're just putting a different filter over it. Like,
right.
Every experience is subjective.
Yeah.
The objective and the subjective are same. You can't divorce the observer as if you're like this detached consciousness just looking at the universe in a completely like detached manner. That doesn't work.
But Sumo, you're slipping into solipsism. What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? Don't do it, Sumo.
I'm not slipping into solipsism. It's just that the observer and the observed are always connected.
Yeah.
And you don't, just don't choose as your center what's ugly.
Yeah.
Choose as your center what's good and what is the most like life affirming, really. Like, what isn't like everything is just, because let me tell you something. This whole thing about evolution where everything is, and I'm not against evolution, I'm against this spin on it, where everything is like dog eat dog. It's just the survival of the fittest. We're all just going to nature red in tooth and claw, right? And then explain butterflies.
Yeah.
Right? If that were true, all of life would have evolved to have like metal plate armor and shoot rockets.
Sperm rockets.
Right? Because we just have to, and we have metal plate armor and giant stabby faces, and we just spray sperm all the time. Just sperm everywhere, and the females are just covered in like sperm receptors that have like, that's what that would mean.
It's true.
But that isn't what happened because that's not the goal. Life is pursuing what is most beautiful. And yes, there is some evil aspect out there. I can't quite explain it. There's some bad force. There's a satanic evil thing that is making it fallen, and it's not quite operating correctly. But just look out at trees. Life is trying to come forth and be glorious and beautiful.
Yeah.
Right? And like that's what's happening. It's not just who has the most sperm hoses. Mm-hmm. Right? That doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't.
So that's all. Like, just have the correct center and things start to snap into focus.
Yeah.
Your kata suddenly makes sense. All of the old texts, all of the sermons, the scriptures, all the dogmas, they suddenly start to snap into focus, and you stop doing nonsense if you create the right center. Like a lot of Catholics and other Christians and Orthodox run into the same problem because they're like, well, we have all of our dogmas, we have all of what the church fathers said, we got the Bible, we've got the traditions, and also man evolved from monkeys in a dog eat dog, tooth and red and claw way. Yeah. And they try to merge these. It's like you can have evolution, if you, and like, there's arguments against even that for sure, but the motives behind it, like what's driving it, you can't merge that on there. And when you do, you start talking nonsense and you come up with all these insane ideas and all of your, you start calling things mortal sins that aren't mortal sin. You start coming up with all these things. Everything just starts spiraling out of control.
Or the thing that I run into more is that doctrine and theology are the center rather than God himself.
Exactly. They've got the wrong center.
Yeah.
And when you have the wrong center, everything spins out like, because you can make anything the center. You can. Yeah. But only the correct center makes what is actually the most beautiful and true, like the most beautiful and good, right? Mm-hmm. The correct center. makes your kata snap into focus, and that's how you become a genius. Like we were saying earlier, you have to be willing to step out from the herd, which is at the wrong center, enough to where you can find a new perspective to find the right center, but also not be eaten by lions.
That was beautiful.
You have to not be eaten by lions.
I love it.
So anyway, yeah, I was just thinking a lot about karate this week, and my 3D printer that didn't work, but now it does.
It's been a good one, Sumo.
Thank you.